Hi folks, and welcome to another solo Saturday Morning Samoflange. Boy, that took 4 takes. No one's gonna know this. That took 4 friggin' takes to do. That was annoying. I kept tripping over the word another. Solo. I go, another. So, can't talk right now. Hey! So, last week, I did one on top 5 authors. This week, I'm doing one that probably, now that I think about it, because we were going to do, when Mikey and Benjamin and I first talked about this, after my brother suggested it, we were going to do top 5 deceased during our lifetime, and then one for all time, if that makes sense. But as I realized it, I believe all of these people, except for one, passed away during my lifetime. Yeah, all but one did. And that was my number 1, who passed away before my lifetime. So my all-time list was basically one I probably could have just done with Mikey as in our time, because all these people died within our time. Again, talked about it with my brother. He named a few. One of them I agreed with, and we have the same one. It's my number 3 here. But let me see. Who did he have? My wife said, "Oh, that's easy. Top 5." She said all 4 Golden Girls and Bill Paxton. And that was it. She was done. She said it right then and there. And then my brother in the living room goes, "Oh, Bill Paxton. That's me too. Bill Paxton." And now I can't remember for the life of me the other ones that my brother picked. I know 2 of them. Bill Paxton was one. Oh, no, Philip Seymour Hoffman was one of his 2. Maybe he only named 3. I don't know. Seemed like he may have named 5, but I can't remember. But my wife, when she walked in, she asked what we were talking about. I said, top 5 people you died before their time. You wish you would have stayed alive longer. Who? She went, "Oh, that's easy. All 4 Golden Girls and Bill Paxton." I mean, it's like she's actually thought about this several times. Like, oh, yeah, you're just now coming around to this, Matt? Yeah, I mean, this is it. Blah, 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 blah. He just zips it off, and she's done. So, and I didn't get a chance to ask Benjamin. Mikey had a list. Maybe, hold on. Let me see if I can text him. And see if I can read it off during the podcast. I didn't think about that. Sometimes he'll, when he can't make it, he'll go ahead and give us his list, and we'll announce it on the podcast. Benjamin and I have done that before. Okay, so text sent. He's going to send that to me. It'll be coming in live as we're doing this. I'll give Mikey's, and I'll give my little thoughts about it. And Mikey did give me his blessing to go on ahead because he wasn't going to make it. And we got to get these out just because it's going to be harder and harder as the holidays come around to meet up together. But anyway, maybe my number 5 was on my brother's list. Maybe that's what it was. 'Cause I talked about this. The rule is with me, Benjamin, and Mikey, obviously, once we decide on a topic, we do not talk about it. We do not talk about it until we come here. And that's true. We do not. When we decide what the topics are, we may ask questions. Okay, what's the give me the structure. Where's the, I can't remember, the parameters of what we can and can't do, or how do we define what this is? And then after that, we do not talk. We do not talk about it anymore. And that way it's fun to see how much crossover we had, if any. And it always surprises me when we have unexpected crossover. That always surprises, even on vague topics, which I never think we'd have crossover on. We end up having it. Or crossover, but on the wrong thing, or on the things I didn't think we had. So that was interesting too. All right, so maybe he is still busy right now, but if he gives me that text during the next 25 minutes, I'll definitely ring him off to you. But let's go ahead. Let's get to my top 5. I do not have any honorable mentions. I want it to be known. Now that I say that, I know what my other brother's was. Kurt Cobain was on his list. Kurt Cobain. I was surprised because I didn't know he liked Nirvana that much. And obviously, I think a lot of people would also put him on there. I wouldn't. I mean, the truth is, Nirvana was fine in the 90s, but I think they got so popular after his death because he died. I think if he would have still come out, they'd have been popular, but not as, if that makes sense, not as popular. I don't think everyone would be wearing their shirts. They'd have been asked. Metallica is very popular, but you don't see. I see tons of kids wearing Nirvana shirts. Tons of kids wearing Nirvana shirts, and I think Nirvana would have been more like Metallica. They would have been big, but people wouldn't have been wearing their shirts all the time. Oh no, that's just me. But though that was the one, and then my number 5 was the same as my brother's number 5. But I did talk about it with my brother because I knew he wasn't going to be on the podcast. So that was it. So he did give me his top 5. All right. So my number 5. Do I have any? Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't have a single musician on here, but I did have an honorable mention. Never mind. That's what I was getting at. My honorable mention was Mitch Hedberg. Mitch Hedberg was a comedian, very funny. I was honored to be part of his second to the last crowd that he did a gig and then went on the Tonight Show and then died the next day, I believe, in his hotel room. But we got to see. He stopped in Louisiana, in my hometown. He was doing one last show, and he was talking about going to the Tonight Show, and he wanted to test out for later on that week, and he wanted to test out a few jokes with us because that's what he was saying. And we were his second to the last stop. Now, he's hilarious. If you listen or watch his stand-up, he's so funny. I think he passed away before his time. I think he would have. I mean, he tried a TV show. He wasn't happy. I think eventually he would have gotten something, and I think he would have been. I think he would have been pretty popular. With Roy gotten more notoriety if he'd have stayed around longer. But just a hilarious guy with simple, stupid jokes, but he made them funny. So at first I thought maybe I'll put him on there, but then when I looked at all my lists, I said, nah, he's not on there. So Mitch, love you. And I think Mitch Hedberg himself is a really great album to listen to. Or just watch his stand-up on YouTube. He's a great guy. So that's my only honorable mention here. We're doing honorable mentions because obviously I'm not going to spoil anyone else's top 5 because no one else is here. But my number 5 is the only man who I loved to play Superman, and that's Christopher Reeves. Shocked. I remember where I was when he died. Now, he was already paralyzed. No, when he got paralyzed, I remember where I was. When he had an accident on a horse. I was in Baton Rouge in a restaurant, a Cajun restaurant, with my buddy Roger. I know exactly where I was when he got injured. That was big news to me because I was like, oh, because, he was Superman. He was the Superman of the 70s and early to mid 80s. And you always thought he could come back and do something else if need be. And then he got in that, I remember when he was paralyzed and everything, I was shocked. I was like, oh no, that's awful. And, he was very positive and, trying to make a positive recovery. He stayed in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, but he did do some acting on Smallville, which I really enjoyed. Now, if you have never watched Christopher Reeve's Superman, go do yourself a favor. You're killing me. You're killing me, Smalls. Go do yourself a favor and watch them. Even the fourth one is good because Christopher Reeves is excellent. The story sucks. But Christopher Reeves as Clark Kent is great. Maybe at his best. Well, not at his best in 4, but definitely in rare form in Superman 4, which is an awful movie, but Christopher Reeves is excellent. And then start watching Christopher Reeves in other movies. He's excellent. He's got comedic timing. He's got charm. He could be the action man, the lead man. He had it all. One of the most underrated actors out there is Christopher Reeves. Fight me. Fight me. I think you're wrong if you don't agree with me. Or you're just ignorant if you don't agree with me. Ignorant of his movies. Because he is such a good actor. He was such a good actor. He had everything. Like I said, the leading man. He could be serious. He could be charming. He could be evil. I've seen him play the bad guy. And all his dimensions, all his characters he could move out. Clark Kent and Superman didn't even feel like the same person. And it was so good. He's the only person that sold that to me. I believed that no one could tell Superman was Clark Kent because when he was Clark Kent, he was wimpy. He slumped his shoulders. And when he was Superman, his shoulders were back. He stood up straight. And he had a more calm, serious demeanor on him. And it was great. It was great. Oh, I loved it. Of course, Superman is probably one of his best, but I will watch anything with Christopher Reeves in it. He's like Michael Keaton. The movie may not be good, but if Michael Keaton's in it, by gum, he's going to give his best. And Christopher Reeves is the same way. He did a episode, I think it was Sleeping Beauty on Fairy Tale Theater. I watched that with my girls a few months ago. He's excellent. He's excellent. He's got comedic timing, but he's selling it like he's, playing straight, but he's just kind of a little foppish and over the top, and he's excellent. So Christopher Reeves, I wish you wouldn't have had I think the accident came too soon, if not his passing away. All right, my number 4 is one that I am 1,000% sure Mikey has on his. I will be floored if he gives me his top 5, he does not have this on here, because I would have guessed we would have had 2 crossover. And my number 4 would have been his maybe number 1, but Jim Henson. Mikey loves Jim Henson. We talked about that in underrated Christmas movies. And Jim Henson, oh my goodness, passed away before his time. He did the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If he would have been around, there would have been more Muppets created. There would have been more original things, more thoughtful, insightful things. I mean, I think he was on the tip of the iceberg. I mean, CGI he would have enjoyed too, and he'd be fine with that. But think about the practical effects, about how he could get these costumes to move, how he got the turtles to look so real. And he would have just gone the extra mile and made some amazing things. And his imagination was never ending. And I think we would have seen just incredible things, not even just family-oriented, adult-oriented stories too, I think you would have told. So definitely a great mind who was gone before his time, and would have gone on to create a massive amount of great storytelling for generations to cherish. I really believe that. That sounds a little grandiose now that I think about it, but I really do mean that. And of course, unfortunately, Jim Henson is also the reason Disney started gaining power, because he did the whole legacy. He created the whole legacy, loss of legacy feeling, I guess. If you want your legacy to continue, you must deliver it to a company that you think will last forever. And so he wanted it to last forever, so he sold it to Disney. And George Lucas was in the same mindset. He wanted someone to take his legacy. Bob Iger talks about this in his autobiography, that George was thinking about that, what Jim Henson had done, and he and Bob were good friends, and so he was maybe shopping Star Wars to Disney because he wanted to live way past, his prime when George passed away. He wanted his legacy not to die off, which I don't think it would have. I think maybe his kids didn't want it, or maybe didn't trust his kids. I don't know. Either way, unfortunately, Bob it fell into his lap, and he was a smart guy. You can hate Bob Iger all day, but he's a smart dude. And he picked it up at a steal, $4 billion, which he said was overvalued at the time because George hadn't made any movies lately, so they kind of devalued the stock of Star Wars, even though they knew full well they could make 3 times as much. Anyway, though, so the I totally forgot who I was talking about here. I talked about George, Jim Henson, yeah. Had to go back and look and see. But with Jim Henson, obviously, very talented person, died before his time. And if Mikey does not have that one, I'll eat my hat. I don't even have a hat, but I'll eat it. All right, so who is number 3? Number 3 was one that I think Mikey would have possibly had on his list, which I would have been fine saying 2 on. And my brother and I did. In fact, this is how the conversation started, because we both feel that Norm Macdonald passed away too soon. Obviously, Norm Macdonald did not let anyone know he was dying. And so it came as a shock to everyone when they announced that he had passed away. And I was absolutely upset by this, because Norm Macdonald was someone, his videos didn't pop up much on YouTube for me, but if I ever saw him doing one of his podcasts or something, I would watch it. Norm was one of those people who I thought was really funny. Back in the 90s, when SNL was at their peak, their golden age, right? Chris Farley, David Spade, Adam Sandler. Back in the heyday, when they were all making movies, right? They were kind of leaving, Phil Hartman. They were kind of all, it was leaving SNL. And someone says, who was your favorite of that SNL golden cast, of characters? I always stated Norm Macdonald. I always did. It was even when Adam Sandler was bringing in the big bucks on the movies and stuff. And, Rob Schneider was big too. Chris Farley was big back then. I said, no, it was Norm Macdonald for me. In fact, Dirty Work, I have that on DVD. I had it on VHS too. I loved Dirty Work. I thought it was hilarious. Me and my cousin would watch it all the time. I bought a previewed copy, I remember, at Blockbuster when it came out. I saw the movie in theaters and thought it was great, and then bought it on previewed because you could get them for like $5 back then. Walmart didn't have the deals like they do now. And I'd watch all the time with my cousin, and we'd laugh. And one of his favorite quotes, and one of mine too, he had that little tape recorder in the movie. He'd go, he'd play back some of his idioms, and he listened to one that said, when life is at its worst, there's always beer. And he's like, ah. And my cousin thought that was so funny. Cousin's a beer drinker. And he would quote that. I mean, right now, if I was to go up to him and say, when life is at its worst, and he goes, there's always beer. And we just love that quote. And there's a few other quotes that we loved it too. But he was just so funny. When I watch his talk show or his podcast, every blue moon, like I said, when I dip in and listen to it, I would guffaw. I think Norm Macdonald, just his face, his little smile when he's poking the bear or crossing a line on something, he has this little, I'm kidding. Yeah, you gonna get mad? And he would go, the like conversation with Andy Dick and all the other people he'd have on there was just poking the bear. Everyone loved him, though. He had that sparkle in his eye. Supposedly, he was a really nice guy. I probably believe that. It's sad that all these stories came out after his death, but that's what happens, right? You tell all these personal stories about your good friend. Conan O'Brien told a lot of funny stories about Norm Macdonald, saying that, in fact, Conan O'Brien, I used to love watching Conan O'Brien. I was a big Conan O'Brien fan. I never, on the late night wars, David Letterman, I watched Johnny Carson a little bit when I was in high school. And then Jay Leno, I did not watch. I hated his face. I just thought he was stupid. And so I switched to Dave Letterman, but I wasn't a big Dave Letterman fan. I watched a few things on him, and I was good. But Conan O'Brien, I saw his very first episode when he took over the Late Show, and I just kept watching him. And he was funny, doing in the year 2000 skits, interviewing Bill Clinton, the president at the time, Triumph, the insult comic. And that was just his heyday. But I kept watching Conan when he went to TBS and stuff like that, Andy Richter and everything. And he would have Norm on a lot. And that's why I loved him, because I got to see Norm a lot on there. And Norm would kind of stick around. And that's because Conan wanted him to stay around. And he said, I couldn't get enough Norm. I always wanted Norm to come back on the show. And I remember that because I was thinking, wow, no one else has Norm Macdonald on but Conan O'Brien. And it was just another reason to enjoy Conan. I think is funny too, but Conan and Norm just talking back and forth, and Norm kind of commenting when other guests were on the in the chair and he's over on the sofa. Just so funny. You can go back and watch all these clips. Now, Conan just released like a ton. Once Norm Macdonald passed away, he just released all his favorite Norm Macdonald clips, and they are all excellent. The dude is just funny. He's funny. For some reason, I get his humor. I love him. I didn't know Dave Chappelle had a wonderful story about him. Dave Chappelle did not want to be in the movie. Was it Dirty Work or Halfback? I can't remember what. I think it was Dirty Work. And Norm Macdonald kind of, treated him with kindness and kind of brought him in, befriended him, comforted him after the loss of his dad had died. So, I mean, everyone had so many wonderful stories to share, and I'm here to listen to him like, wow, that's great. Norm was a big bettor. And so he was angry. He'd always bet money and stuff. I think Adam Sandler told a story where he'd keep money in the fridge. He is, because when they rob your house, they never check the fridge. And Adam Sandler goes, wow, that's not crazy, that's actually true. And it's true. It really is. So that was, and then the other one was David Spade trying to get lunch with Norm Macdonald, but Norm was, I guess, not feeling well or close to the end, and he kept pushing David Spade back, but David Spade almost thought it was a joke. Like Norm would announce, hey, let's go out to eat next Friday, and they go, no, I can't do it, and would blame it on COVID, even though he didn't care about COVID. But David Spade didn't get it. He said, well, I'll come to your house then. We'll order take-in. And he'd always kid back and forth with him, but never didn't want David Spade to see him at his worst. I can't remember what the stand-up was. It's Norm Macdonald, The Last Word or something like that. It's about 40 minutes long. It's great. It's great. Some of his best jokes are in there, his dialogue and stuff. And then afterwards, you watch on Netflix. Afterwards, they have Dave Chappelle, Molly Shannon, David Letterman. David Letterman was there. Conan O'Brien, and who I can't remember who else. Adam Sandler and David Spade. I think they were all there, and they'd watched it, and then they give their thoughts. And David Letterman kind of took over as a host. Since they were supposed to talk about it, David Letterman just kind of took the reins and started asking questions of everyone. But David Letterman even had stories to share about him. And I didn't realize that he was that close to David Letterman, even though he did kind of tear up when he said goodbye to David Letterman when he was leaving the air, which I thought, oh, that's kind of weird. And honestly, that's really the only time I watched any other late night was when Norm Macdonald was going to be the guest. I would watch it for Norm Macdonald. That is actually true, because I remember seeing that episode. I didn't care about Dave Letterman saying goodbye after so many years. My friends all came over and we watched it, but only when Norm Macdonald was on did I ever watch anyone else's late night show. So Norm Macdonald, definitely, it may have been on Mikey's. I don't know. It doesn't look like he's going to send me his. It was on my brother's. It was on mine. And we were talking about Norm Macdonald, and that's when my brother said, hey, maybe you should do a top 5 celebrities that passed before their time. And I was thinking, well, it's a good idea, All right, so the next 2. Oh, man. No one is going to guess this one. If you had this one on your list before you heard me talk, I'll call you a liar. But if you've seen this show, then you'll say, oh, yes, I forgot about him. I definitely put him on there. Andy Whitfield from Spartacus. Folks, you can't watch. Spartacus is not a show for kids, not a show for families, maybe not even a show for your wife. It's one of those, turn the laptop close to you when you hit play. But there's a lot of, the old 2000s nudity. Showtime had to do a lot of nudity in their shows back then. But this series is excellent. In fact, now that I'm talking about it, I'm going to add it to my. I've got to watch it again. I've got to watch it again. I want my wife to watch it, but I don't think she'll like all the nudity. But the show is killer, man. It's a killer show. My buddy Bernardo watched it just recently, about a year ago, and he's like, bro, he said this. He bought the board game. He was playing, loved the board game. Then watched the show and was like, bro, this show is excellent. I went, I know. It's so good. It's so good. Such a good show. Such good intrigue. And Andy Whitfield is Spartacus. I mean, he has that look. He has the look of an underdog, but he's got strength. He's got power. And in the first season, he is so good. And I know the series hurt because he passed away in between season 1 and 2. They did like a half season, like a 1.5 season 1.5, which I call season 2. In my opinion, went 4 seasons, but it was like a very short 6-episode season. It was supposed to be part of season 2. They were going to go flashback before Spartacus went to the house of Batiatus, and then flash forward to what's going on right now. Now that the house is destroyed and they're on the run, which would have been really interesting. Really interesting. I think it would have made season 2 a lot better. But unfortunately, he passed away. So in seasons 2 and 3, a new Spartacus takes over. And I'm not going to knock the guy for being terrible. He looks like a pretty boy. I hate to say it, he just kind of looks like a clean-cut Spartacus. Andy Whitfield had this kind of dirty look to him, this real life, beat down because I've been a slave for so long. And this other guy did not. He looked like, perfectly combed hair and perfectly white, straight teeth. I don't know, something about him I just didn't like. So, and it's sad because it's not the actor's fault. He's trying to replace someone else and continue on with the show. And it's still good, but definitely seasons 2 and 3 are not that good because Andy Whitfield is not Spartacus. And, if he could have stayed alive just 2 more years, and finished that series. And honestly, if he had stayed alive, this would have catapulted his career. I have no doubt. He was on the verge of stardom. He was going to be discovered in Spartacus and go star in a ton of good movies. I honestly believe that. But, oh my goodness. Again, me talking about it, I'm going to go watch Spartacus. I've got to watch Spartacus again. So good. But what I tell people to do who haven't seen Spartacus, watch the first season, watch the second season, and take a year off. Take a year off. That way you may forget what he looked like. And maybe you'll be able to watch 2 and 3 without going, I don't like when they replace characters on a TV show. I recently finished The Waltons, and seasons 8 and 9 and some of the movies, half the movies, they replace him with this character who does a terrible John Boy impersonation, and is just terrible overall. He feels flat as an actor, and I don't like when they replace characters. And of course they have to, because the other characters don't want to be on the show anymore. They leave or whatever. They're out of contract. Andy Whitfield got replaced because he passed away, and they had to bring someone else in. And they had to continue the story of Spartacus, too. They couldn't just kill off the main character of the show. So, it's sad that they had to do it, because with him in it, I think this would have been easily my number one show of all time. I don't know if it's my number one show of all time, but it's definitely up in my top 5. Maybe we should do that. Top 5 TV shows of all time. Anyway, if you've seen Spartacus, you're probably slapping your forehead going, oh, dadgummit, I forgot about Andy Whitfield. I definitely have him on there. So you're welcome. All right, who is number 1? Folks, if you know me, you've probably already guessed this. It's an author before my time. The only one that died before my time, I believe, and that is J.R.R. Tolkien. You're like, Matt, didn't he die when he was way old? Yes, but he deserved 20 more years, 30 more years. I don't know. I wanted him to write more. I remember, who was it? I think Stephen King, in his book On Writing, talked about how people don't want something to end. People still wish they could live back, or maybe it was Robert Jordan. I think Robert Jordan said this. He did not want The Lord of the Rings to end. He wanted Tolkien to write more and more stories. He wanted to wrap himself up in the warm blanket of storytelling that Mr. Tolkien provided and never leave. I feel the same way. I wish he would have written. Christopher Tolkien printed every square inch of writing that he ever made, okay? I've enjoyed it all. I've lapped it up like a hungry dog. But if he could have made it alive, would he have ever finished the Silmarillion if he would have given just 5 more years? No. But he still would have been writing. And he still would have been writing about Middle-earth and toying around with different things, toying around with the Lost Tales, toying around with the Silmarillion, giving us more lore. And I would have loved it. I mean, when you're old and decrepit, how much can you write? I don't care. Maybe his son takes over and starts writing as he dictates to his son. Or I do it for free. Or getting a chance to meet J.R.R. Tolkien. Oh my gosh. That'd have been just great. We were raised off of those stories as kids. I mean, we read them every year. I read through them almost every other couple of years in between. And so I'm looking it up now. He died in 73, so before my time too. But there's no way, no chance I would have gotten to meet him at any time. Unless he lived 20 years maybe older. But the thing is, though, I just love Tolkien. I will, not this year, maybe next year, I will be walking through Middle-earth again, sooner rather than later. I had some back-to-back Tolkien reads, because I reread him, I want to say in 2020, I reread it. Then 2021, History of Middle-earth. Then 2022, read a bunch of other little things here and there. I read the Bilbo's poem, the poems from Tom Bombadil, and some other stuff. Now, usually I don't do back-to-back years. I do every other year, and I read Lord of the Rings. But this year I kind of did back-to-back 4 years, even though this year I didn't read that much. I read a little bit of Tolkien's world. So enough to tide me over. Is it enough to tide me over for 2023? I don't know. I could go another year, maybe, but eventually I'll have to reread those books again. But if Tolkien could have been alive, just to keep writing about Middle-earth. It's very selfish, I know, to say that, but that's how I feel. So if anyone knew me, you probably already guessed that, especially when I said one of them died before my time. And he would have been the only one that would have been true all time on our original list that we thought. But hey, folks, let me know in the comments. Who are your... I cheated you out of giving a good list last week. But this week, I'm going to let you go ahead and put in who your top 5 biggest regrets were. Let me know in the comments. And, next week, we'll probably have Mikey or Benjamin or both back. Surely between now and Christmas, we can get something together. I don't want to spoil what it is, but I don't think people are going to be happy about it. I think it's Christmas themed, but you may enjoy it. Who knows? But either way, I'm not going to spoil it. Folks, we'll see you next time on another as I'm alone. I get to do it myself again. Saturday Morning Samoflange.